Hello and welcome to this episode of the Expanding Podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Jed from Canopy Commerce. Welcome, Jed. Fantastic to see you again, as always.
Yeah, pleasure, Drew. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. We are going to be enlightened today from some of Jed's skill set and knowledge. We're going to be talking specifically about strategy onto Amazon, the what to do when you're on Amazon after you've got started, and then some of the KPI pieces and ongoing strategy and what to not to do and what to do on Amazon. So I'll hand over to you, Jed, if you wouldn't mind doing a quick intro and a bit of an overview about Canopy for those who may not be well versed.
Yeah, great. So yeah, I'm Jed Lightfoot. I'm the owner and founder of Canopy Commerce. So we're effectively a full service Amazon agency that specializes in brands on Vendor Central. Most of my background has been on Vendor Central for the last sort of 8 to 9 years, both working in house for brands like Betty Demi Pottery, and then more recently working in agencies before setting up Canopy Commerce a couple of years ago. So yeah, we're effectively offer full service, but we also do one-off project and audit-based work. So we specialize a lot in Amazon business audits and also international and European expansion.
Awesome. So a bit of everything. Just to kick off, maybe a very basic question, and to our audience, one that they're completely well versed on. But for those that are new to Amazon, can you just explain to us the difference between a vendor and a seller?
Yeah, so in simple terms, a vendor would be someone who sells to Amazon, and a seller would be somebody who sells on Amazon. So wholesale versus retail, very different models. But yeah, that's the fundamental difference.
Okay, it's nice and simple. And thank you for those who are brand new to Amazon. And of course, in order to get on vendor, you need to be invited by Amazon, right? So you need to have typically had some really strong foothold on Amazon yourself. And then I've got a proven track record, right, which we're going to touch on a little bit later. So thank you. Great stuff. All right, let's kick it off. So as a starter for 10, Jed, what are the most important factors to consider before deciding to expand on an Amazon marketplace, and either domestically or internationally, for those who may have got their Amazon business already domestically, but then want to take the step across the pond, or in fact they haven't started at all?
Yeah, good question. I think first off for me, the main thing you want to ask yourself is, is there real demand for the product in the target market that you're interested in? I think many brands jump in thinking that their UK success should translate well internationally, but every marketplace is different and behaves differently. So I think one of the main factors for me before expanding is first reviewing the local competition, including total market size and size of the prize. What does the market share between brands look like compared to the UK? Who are the top 10 brands who are in the category in each market? Things like what monthly sales volumes are those brands doing? So any agency sort of worth the salt would be able to give you that information. And if you're not working directly with an agency, there is tools out there that can help you get that information. So that for me would be the first thing I would do. And then I think once you've got a feel for the size of the prize and product feasibility, if you will, the next important factor would be operational readiness. So everything from inventory and logistics to new market SKU setup. Does your company effectively have any prior experience selling in those markets? Except you don't know what you don't know, and try to make sure that if you don't know, you're working with people that do have experience. So yeah, I think for me those would be the main things I would look at.
Great. I think that's a really interesting point about you don't know what you don't know, because quite typically when an e-commerce brand's been successful domestically and they want to start trading in another country, obviously, whilst a platform like Amazon is very similar in many ways, some sellers fail to take into consideration the differences in language, in A+ content delivery, lots of these different aspects, and that can obviously become troublesome further down the line and lead to not as much success as they anticipated. So I think that's a really, really good point. So in terms of the competitive analysis, so when they're looking at their competition in region, if they wanted to do this on their own, or they wanted to, go down the route of identifying who those players were, what role does it play, I suppose, specifically, and then how should a brand ensure that they conduct it effectively?
Yeah, I think competitive analysis it's a massive role. I think people need to remember that Amazon is effectively like a search engine. So you're not just competing on quality, but you're also competing on effectively on visibility. So you really need to analyze at least your top 10 competitors on everything from pricing, reviews, keywords, content. I also look at bestseller rankings, which would differ by each market that you're in, and also if you can gain any insight on competitor ad presence as well, that is really, really useful. So tools like Helium 10 or Jungle Scout can help with this. But I think the real wins for me are, trying to identify a competitor's weakness in that particular market. So things like poor A+ content or under leveraged PPC. So if you can spot some of those weaknesses, you're in a better position to exploit them. So I think that would be one. And then the other thing for me would be competitor market share analysis is often really sort of underlooked. I think it's worth tracking that if you can monthly to get a feel of how the market specifically is moving versus your own performance. I don't think enough brands really track market share analysis specifically for Amazon. There is tools out there that can do it. And again, if you're working with an agency, that they should be able to provide you with those sorts of insights.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks, Jed. And on the flip side of that, what are the common mistakes brands make when they're trying to replicate domestic success on international marketplaces? Presumably it's the opposite of what you've just said, but is there anything that they specifically don't do and they should do outside of maybe the analysis piece?
Yeah, I think there's some classic ones. I think just sort of copying and pasting listings would be a common one that I say. For example, a UK product title full of keywords might not make any sense to a German consumer, for example. So another big one for me would be assuming pricing can also stay the same. You've got to bear in mind things like VAT, duties, different trading terms, different currency fluctuations. They can have a massive impact on the margin. So I think market localization and having a full P&L analysis is really important in my experience. Achieving profitability in new markets over the first couple of years is a challenge. So especially if you want to get to scale. So a mistake brands make is not truly accounting for all the costs associated with expansion.
Very nice, thank you. In marketplaces, I know your core strength, although you've got many, is in Amazon.
Yeah.
In terms of a go-to-market strategy, so whether that be starting out domestically or moving internationally, how does it differ, in your opinion, from other marketplaces? And is it the same in every way, or is there many differences between, say, your go-to-market strategy or, say, eBay, something like that?
Yeah, good question. I think I would say Amazon is probably more performance driven. It's more algorithm first approach. Every aspect from things like SEO to ads to fulfillment has to be, effectively has to feed that Amazon flywheel, unlike other marketplaces like Wayfair or Walmart, maybe, for example. Amazon rewards sales velocity and conversion from day one. So the go-to-market strategy has to be faster and more aggressive, I would say, than other marketplaces. So I think in practice, for me, that means like making sure that your products are launched with authority, using best-in-class content, optimized and translated for each market, and that you have a plan in place to make sure that you're driving traffic to those new listings to help build relevancy. I would personally look at programs like Vine to make sure you're gaining early customer
Yeah.
reviews if you go into launch, and to try and get some in-market feedback on your product, which might be very different than the feedback you're getting in your own current market. And I'd also make sure that the ad campaigns are set up from day one, because you want to try and drive as much traffic as you can to the listing. So I think those would be the main different points versus the other marketplaces.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, the listings element as well, and the reviews, obviously a key piece of, for feedback perspective, but also for supporting your listing and acceleration. So,
Yeah.
okay, so that's Jed, that's really helpful from understanding what needs to be done on the Amazon platform in order to, make a success, or at least start your successful route overseas. What about the logistical and operational hurdles when it comes to selling overseas or starting out? Let's keep it along the same lines.
Yeah, I think for me the big one is simply underestimating the logistical complexities. Things that seem simple, like transporting stock from the UK to the EU, especially on Vendor Central, where you've got very short delivery times, is difficult. You've got to make sure you've got a plan in place that's going to meet the needs of Amazon as a retailer. So I often see stock getting held up in customs, for example, which can often lead to missed delivery windows. So for Europe, you've got things like VAT compliance, you've got translation requirements on packaging, you've got, the EU responsible person requirements. Then on top of that, you've got, FBA, which works very differently across different regions. So, if you're on the vendor side, there's programs such as PIX, which is Amazon's inbound consolidation service, which I think could help on that.
Okay.
Which is effectively allows you to reduce the number of FCs that you ship to. So instead of getting a purchase order every Monday for 20 FCs in Germany, it would be one PO to one market, which I think that can really simplify the logistical setup. And then if you're not on vendor, you could look at things like Pan EU FBA, for example, where Amazon would distribute the goods across different markets for you. So those are the main things I would say.
Interesting. You mentioned about the vendor distribution to one FC, and presumably then
Yeah.
they'll distribute that to those 20 that you would originally have had to fulfill those POs for, right? So internally, in the same way as the second option for Seller Central, there you mentioned about the FBA route.
Yeah.
What about a fulfilled by merchant strategy? So if a seller doesn't want to adopt the FBA route and wants to fulfill that themselves from their own third party, their own warehouse maybe, or a third party location, does it change how one would react, or one would set up their account?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So FBA is really the launch accelerator, I would call it. So for things like faster delivery times, Prime, getting the Prime badge, achieving higher conversion rates. Whereas FBM, fulfilled by merchant, can work if your logistics are top of the range.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're in a niche category, for example, and you have very expensive products or very large products. Alternatively, I see FBM sometimes working in the reseller market as well, where resellers are on really tight margins and they have to try and cut costs as much as they possibly can. But generally speaking, for most brands that want to sell goods in volume on Amazon, you should really look to default to an FBA position, at least when you're first starting out. But make sure that you've got that P&L built out so that you can still promote and make a profit. So those are the main things I would consider. I think FBM can work under certain circumstances, but generally speaking, my recommendation to clients is if you can go with FBA, try and go with FBA.
Fine. And in your opinion, FBA would be a smoother, less frictionless route, particularly if you're starting out overseas, right?
100%, yeah. Let Amazon deal with. They're the specialists in customers want next day delivery, or as soon as they can delivery. They want the products to arrive on time. You don't have to deal with customer returns.
Mm-hmm.
Let them take care of that. You focus on getting the product to them and making sure that the product detail page is as optimized as possible. That for me is always the default go-to strategy, unless you're really geared up from a logistics perspective to meet those Amazon's expectations. Because if you're not, your seller account will get penalized pretty quickly by Amazon.
Sure, interesting. Thank you. I'd like to touch on advertising a little bit now, which is an area of expertise that I don't hold, and I have some knowledge gaps myself, and I'm quite interested in it. But and often, when I'm buying something on an e-commerce site, I want to somewhat be told a story about it, particularly if I'm investing, a fair amount of money in it. If I'm going on and buying something for a few quid, which is a day-to-day tool that I need, then not so much. But if I'm buying something or I want to be sold something, storytelling is really important. But how do you find that in ensuring that is consistent or specific, maybe, whichever way it is, across regions for consumers, like that piece?
Are you talking specifically about advertising? Or
Yes,
are we talking about storytelling more generally?
Yeah, I mean, more about advertising, like when, how
Okay.
a listing's set up, how important is it to have that, maybe dialed right in or specific to a region?
Yeah. So it's certainly very important. You've got to make sure from an ads perspective, the keywords you're going after, in your native market won't necessarily translate to the keywords which a European consumer might search in their own language, for example. So it's really important that firstly you do the keyword analysis and looking at how consumers search on Amazon in their own market. And once you understand that, then getting advertising campaigns set up is really important. I think for brands starting out, you want to be looking at, as a ballpark figure, sort of 20 to 30% of your projected revenue on ad spend, at least for the first few months, in order to try and drive traffic to the listings and build some sales velocity. And then you've got to also consider what sort of ads you want to launch with. So most brands go with sponsored product ads initially, because they convert the most and they're easiest to set up. And then once you start to build some organic ranking, then you can start to overlay different types of ads. So sponsored brand ads might be effective, which can link to your brand store or link directly to your products. And then you can also start to do things like sponsored display, things like remarketing as well. So the goal really is to, if you can hit break even with ads while ramping up your organic while ranking up your organic position, that would be the main aims, I would say.
Okay, cool. And I don't. That's very interesting. Direct answers to that. How long would that typically take for you to take? You're running at zero. How long would you anticipate that taking before you start to see some, significant sales increase organically?
Yeah, it's a great question. Organically can take time, especially when you're in a new market. So I wouldn't, even for a brand which is very well known in your own market and you've got thousands of reviews, don't expect those that success to just translate instantly in different markets. Allow yourself to take at least 6 months to start going. Amazon, it can be quite slow to get organic ranking position. That's why you've got to invest early in advertising and reviews to build that up, because you're competing against thousands of other products, thousands of other brands, and it's going to take time regardless of how well known your brand is. So yeah, I would say give yourself at least 6 months to start seeing some real traction.
Sure. Okay, nice. And just talking about a go-to-market strategy, if you've got a product that is extremely niche, and there's not these thousands of sellers that you mentioned selling that same product, how big would that be, or how would you play it differently against a product that you're putting on Amazon where there is these thousands of sellers trying to compete for the buy box or whatever?
Yeah, if your brand is really niche, then you're really going to have to understand how many people are actually searching for that particular brand or product initially to make sure it's, is it even worth doing? If it's so niche that nobody's searching for it, then it might not be worth doing it. But if it's niche enough where you've actually got a gap in the market, then that's where the big winners come from in Amazon. You see all these brands that that are getting that end up getting bought out within a few years because they've actually created the category to begin with, and all of a sudden the category which started out as niche then becomes mainstream. That's what everyone is effectively looking for. So it's really, for me, it's looking at those niche categories which are growing, where you can see the search volumes growing month over month. Those are the ones to look out for. And if you can get a first mover advantage on Amazon, by the time that category really gets hold, then you're in a really strong position. So yeah, that would be my advice on that.
Okay, awesome. And how about have you got any examples, Jed, of someone who you've worked with, or maybe not necessarily worked with, who has absolutely nailed their go-to-market strategy, and maybe somebody that done exactly what you've just referenced there with regards to starting off a category? Share some wins.
Yeah, I think from wins from my side, I mean, one standout was we worked with a large US-based toy brand who wanted to expand their vendor business across the EU. So, we worked with them and we made sure that we had, we partnered with things like native translators to make sure that the content wasn't just was really honed in for each specific target market around things like keywords. So not just translating the content, but effectively redoing the content to be market specific. We made sure that we leveraged Amazon's internal teams. Amazon have teams internally you can work with that specialize in helping brands expand. It can be quite difficult to get onto, but if you have the right contacts, it can certainly help. And then just ticking all the boxes. So things like investing heavily in sponsored advertising and making sure that you've got your brand store set up for each specific market. They had brands that were fairly well known in the US. And they had a lot of reviews. So one of the things we wanted to make sure was that those reviews were synced across into each market initially. It's not an automatic that would happen. Sometimes you can have the same ASIN, and for whatever reason the reviews aren't syncing across into the market as you would expect. So you have to go back and forth with Amazon to make sure that is in place, because that will really help make sure that the products are launched, as I say, launched with authority. And we saw sales pick up for that brand pretty quickly after launch. So I think that for me was one of the good successes we had.
Nice. And with that brand and the others that you work with, what KPIs should either their agency, so what KPIs would you track, or what KPIs would the brand, or you suggest the brand track in the first 90 to 180 days of trading to ensure that they're on target and on target for success?
Yeah, I mean, there's various KPIs that we track as an agency. So the obvious things like traffic would be one, glance views, and then measuring the glance views also against conversion rates is really key as well. And then from an advertising perspective, you want to be measuring your advertising cost of sale versus your total advertising cost of sale, so your ACOS and your TACOS, and then other things such as keyword ranking movement. So both organic, I would term it as organic keyword ranking performance. So how is what are you ranking for organically based on specific keywords on a month by month basis, and where are you starting off from? Put a marker in the sand, and where do you want to where do you think you can get to based on the activity that you're putting in place? That's a really key one for me. The reviews as well. So monitoring how many reviews you've currently got, where you would like to get to. I mean, generally speaking, you want to make sure that you've got a minimum of 15 product reviews for the organic ranking to really kick in. So that for me is the first step from a review perspective. And then I think the last main one would be buy box percentage as well. You want to make sure that you're winning the buy box at least the majority of the time, unless you've got some specific distribution policy in place where you want to work with different partners. If not, you want to make sure that you're really winning the buy box for the products that you've got in your portfolio. So I'd say those would be the main ones.
Nice, very insightful. Thank you. And Jed, just final question for me today. To recap on everything you've said, for a go-to-market strategy, have you got, or can you give me the pillars, the main key pillars of what somebody would need to focus on in order to take their brand overseas or get started? Can you put it into some nice, strong foundations?
I can give it a go. I think, yeah. So let's go with 5 pillars. So I think number 1 would be market research. Is there demand? And who, if there is demand, who are the brands that are currently winning? I think number 2 would be around content and branding. Are your listings optimized and are they visually compelling? And also, are they optimized for each market that you want to sell in? So that would be number 2. I think number 3 would be fulfillment strategy. So FBA versus FBM, vendor versus seller, depending on the region and what sort of scale you would like to achieve. So doing that analysis and committing to that method once you know what that is. I think number 4 would be advertising. So you need to make sure that that you've got a plan, that you launch, you've got a budget in place, and that you're in order to gain that traction that you want to see. And then finally would be operational readiness. So this is where a 3PL would come in. So and also things around compliance, tax, returns, customer service. I think that would be the final key pillar to actually launch with authority.
Fantastic. Jed, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your insights as always. Always a pleasure talking to you. If anybody listening to this wants to get in touch or find out a bit more information or just have a chat and see if you can support with their strategy, we'll put it in any links that we send out with this. But how can they get hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So we've got you can reach out to us on that. Well, have a look at our website, canopycommerce.com, and you can also that's got our full information there now to how to get in touch. But yeah, I'd say that would be the first part call.
Fantastic. Jed, thank you again. I will catch up with you soon, and thank you for listening. Any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Drew.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.